GS1 Global Office, and as Laura said, welcome to the GS1 Healthcare Provider Advisory Council webinar on traceability in healthcare. Okay, so Laura, how do I move the... I'm not moving. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, so sorry about that. Our first webinar, as we said, and it's entitled The Link Between Traceability and Patient Safety. It is an introductory webinar. We will be running these webinars on a monthly basis. And we wanted the first one to introduce you to GS1, to traceability and its relationship to patient safety. But future webinars will showcase provider implementation case studies. So case studies of where your peers have implemented GS1 standards to enable patient safety. So this slide just shows you the webinars that we have scheduled, the next 5 webinars, so up to the middle of this year. So you will hear case studies from Argentina, from Germany, Belgium, the US, and the final one there, HTG, is the Healthcare Transformation Group, and it's a group of US hospitals that have come together to work and share experiences. So hopefully you will join us again for one or more of these webinars, and you can find more information on those webinars at the link that is shown on this slide. Okay, so as I said, this is an introductory webinar, so we thought we would just introduce you to GS1 and also the GS1 Healthcare Provider Advisory Council, or HPAC. So who is GS1? GS1 is an international standards organization. It's a not-for-profit organization, and we're a federated organization, so our head office is in Brussels. But we have 111 member organizations around the world. And we have over 1 billion members, and they range from the small, medium enterprise or one-person organizations right the way through to global companies, or international, multinational companies. We're member-driven. We facilitate the process of standards development with our members. We serve 150 countries, 20 different domains, and there are 2,500 people helping us. And it's estimated that there are over 6 billion transactions a day using GS1 standards. GS1 Healthcare was established about 9 years ago, and we have a number of groups, and the Healthcare Provider Advisory Council is one of those. It was formed in December 2010, and its objectives are to be a forum for sharing and discussing the practical realities of the implementation of GS1 standards in the caregiving environment, to identify projects that support the adoption of the standards, to identify best practices and case studies for publication, and be a source of expertise of peers, of providers, healthcare providers around the world. Our scope, our members consist of thought leaders and early adopters of GS1 standards from the provider environment, so hospitals, pharmacies, care homes, both clinical and non-clinical staff. and our GS1 member organisations who can also represent their local healthcare provider stakeholders. It is restricted membership, and it's restricted to those from the provider environment, so and GS1 member organisations, and that was a conscious decision because we wanted an environment where providers could learn and understand about GS1 standards and share with their peers, as they are going to, this may be fairly new to them, and implementation in their organizations may be fairly new, where other stakeholders have many years of experience, such as manufacturers or distributors. They have been using GS1 standards for many, many years. If you are interested in finding out more about HPAC, the link is there on this slide, and we manage all of our groups through a collaborative tool called the Community Room. And so if you are interested in joining our group and you are from a provider organization, then you can join using that link. So who's involved at the governance level? So we have tri-chairs. We have someone from the clinic from a clinical background, Fergal McGrty from St James Hospital in Dublin, Ireland. From a non-clinical background, we have Frédéric Frimont from Robert Ballinger in France. We have a GS1 member organization representative, Doris Nessim, from GS1 Canada, but she has a long career and in pharmacy, so is a pharmacist. And then myself, I have the immense pleasure of facilitating the HPAC. So we mentioned that some of our, one of our objectives is making, creating publications and finding case studies. One of the things that we identified early on is that senior people within provider organizations may not know about standards or indeed understand the benefits of implementing them within their organizations. So the group developed an educational slide deck for the C-suite, the senior executives, the boards within provider organizations, so within hospitals, etc. And if you are a member, you are able to download that from our community room. Additionally, two other publications, important documents, they're position statements. And these were created after discussions on our monthly calls about issues encountered when implementing GS1 standards within the provider environment. And these can act as barriers to successful implementation. So our members determined through discussion that they fell into two broad areas. One was barcode issues, and the other was issues around the interoperability of IT systems. Now, these two documents are publicly available, so you can click on those URLs and download them. And from the images, you can see that we have a number of provider organizations who have chosen to endorse these statements. So these position statements are there as a call to action to industry to work to address the issues that are mentioned in those statements. So please feel free to download them. And if your hospital is interested in endorsing the position papers, then please don't hesitate to contact me. We've also introduced two provider awards. The first one is Provider Recognition Award, and this is for individuals who have implemented GS1 standards for at least one process in their organization with clear and demonstrable return on investment, and who are active in GS1 standards development work and recognized as GS1 standards advocate both locally and regionally. And I'm very pleased to say that two of our tri-chairs are past recipients of that award. So Frederic and Fergal have both received the Provider Recognition Award. And then our second award is a Provider Implementation Best Case Study Award. And this is for an organization or an individual within an organization that has implemented GS1 standards for at least one process in their hospital, clinic, care home, pharmacy, or within their department. And again, that has clear and demonstrable return on investment. And we have made one award, and that was given in San Francisco. And we have that case study award as the fourth case study that we will show later in the year. And if you're interested in nominating or self-nominating or applying for those awards, then please go to that link. It is publicly available. And the deadline for the current round of submissions is 30th of June this year, so you've a few months to get your nominations submitted. So that introduces GS1 and the Healthcare Provider Advisory Council. Now to the core topic of this webinar. So how do GS1 standards provide the link between traceability and patient safety? So this is what I will cover. So we're going to talk about drivers, regulations, mention an independent report that has been published on this topic, and then we will focus on GS1 traceability in healthcare. We'll cover the strategy, the added value of traceability. We'll do a very high overview of the GS1 Global Traceability Standard for Healthcare, its key concepts and definitions, and a very quick mention of the implementation guideline. And then we will touch on some examples of case studies of implementation of GS1 standards in healthcare. Okay, so healthcare traceability, what's driving traceability or the need for traceability in healthcare? There are regulations emerging worldwide, both for medical devices and for pharmaceuticals. And those regulations are now moving and affecting the provider community. And across healthcare, we know that costs are increasing, particularly supply chain costs. And so there is a desire to control those. And in this digital world, provider organizations are looking to progress to electronic health records, the ultimate record, the end point, if you like, in the traceability process with the final data repository. And over the last number of years, there have been various reports about medication errors, the number of medication errors that occur within organizations. And therefore, there has been a drive to improve patient safety and bring down those medication errors. We are also seeing a trend of counterfeiting in healthcare. Counterfeiters have moved or are moving away from designer goods into healthcare, not only for pharmaceuticals but for medical devices as well. And therefore counterfeiting affects and undermines brands, and so there is a growing need for brand protection. So this slide just shows a number of examples of crisis and impact. This was a BBC article about fake drugs in the United Kingdom that said that thousands have taken fake drugs. But also we are seeing online risks. So people are sourcing medication online and not always from reputable websites. Again, that increases the risk to those patients that they are getting counterfeit product. But more recently, we have seen two medical device issues. This one with the PIP implants, so substandard implants. This was using industrial grade silicone instead of health or medical grade silicone. And also we've had the issue of metal on metal hip implants. So there are numerous examples of crisis and impact in the healthcare supply chain. And broadly, that is driving the creation of regulations around the world. Now this slide is included because the next couple of slides that I'm going to show you are copyrighted. They cannot be used without permission of GS1 Healthcare. And when this slide deck is published, it will not include these slides. So this slide is very busy, as you can see, and this is just focused on the pharma sector. So these are regulations or requirements or planned or emerging regulations from around the world. And they are emerging because of those issues that I mentioned, those drivers I mentioned earlier. But medical devices are also regulating. Most notably recently was the US publishing their unique device identification regulation, and we are anticipating similar from the EU, but we know that there are many countries around the world that are following that lead. So this is a GS1 webinar, and we are a global standards organization, and therefore you would expect us to advocate for the implementation of global standards to support and enable compliance with regulations and support patient safety, improvement in patient safety. But there is an independent report which has been published called Strength in Unity, the Promise of Global Standards in Healthcare. So it was produced by McKinsey & Company, and it actually quantifies supply chain issues in healthcare, but also highlights the cost savings and patient safety benefits of adopting a single global supply chain standard in healthcare, such as GS1 system of standards. This report is available. You can download it from our website, and there is also an executive summary, a shorter version of that report. And I saw today that this report is now available in French, so you can download it in French as well. This slide is just a few highlights of what is contained in that report. So it quantifies the huge cost savings and patient safety benefits when adopting a global standard. So it says implementing global standards across the entire supply chain could save between 22 and 43,000 lives globally and avoid or avert 0.7 to 1.4 million patient disabilities. Rolling out such standards-based systems globally could prevent tens of millions of dollars worth of counterfeit drugs from entering the legitimate supply chain. And we, that's McKinsey, estimate that healthcare cost could be reduced by $40 billion to $100 billion globally from the implementation of global standards. And adopting a single set of global standards will cost significantly less than two, and they estimate that to be between 10 and 25% less cost to stakeholders. So those are significant numbers, and I would certainly commend the report to you to download and read and make available to your peers. Okay, so let's now turn to GS1's traceability in healthcare in a bit more detail. So this graphic captures, hopefully in a simplified way, the GS1 system of standards. Essentially, it falls into three areas: identify, capture, and share. So the identify section is about the keys that are used to identify things, and that can be locations, it can be items, products, it can be transport units, it can be patients or caregivers. It can also be documents, and for those we have keys. The most common ones that we see in healthcare are the GLN, the Global Location Number, the GTIN, the Global Trade Item Number, and for logistics units, the SSCC, the Serial Shipping Container Code. But we also have keys for, as I said, patients and caregivers. And those keys are captured in what we call carriers. Commonly, they will be seen as barcodes, and we will be familiar, all of us in our daily lives, of seeing black and white vertical lines of a barcode on product. But as you can see here, there are different types of barcodes, and if you look over on the right hand side, you will also see radio frequency identification tags, both passive, high frequency passive and ultra high frequency passive. So those are carriers. They can hold data such as the keys mentioned above. The third area is the share area, and this is about data. And we see three distinct types of data. We see master data. So a GLN or a GTIN, or the dimensions of a case would be master data. The product description would be master data. And we have a standard and a network for capturing and sharing master data, the Global Data Synchronization Network, or GDSN. And that really is necessary so that when you are communicating with your suppliers, that your master data is synchronized, that you are talking about the same thing. The second area is transactional data. So things like a purchase order, or a shipping notification, or an invoice. So documents that move between you and your buyer or your supplier. And we have standards for those, e-commerce standards such as the Electronic Data Interchange, EDI. And then the third area is event data. The genesis for that came out of the electronic product code or RFID area, but is now being harnessed across the system of standards. And for me, I think that's where the greatest benefits will be seen in the future. So that is our system of standards. But this is about traceability. And traceability is not mentioned as a standard on this slide. And that's because traceability is a business process that is enabled by the GS1 system of standards. So by identifying product, capturing that identification in a carrier, and sharing that data across the supply chain will enable traceability. And when we talk about traceability, we mean all of these different sub-processes or terms. So for us, traceability is both about tracking and tracing. It also enables authentication of the identifier on the product. It enables chain of custody or chain of ownership. And if you have traceability, it also enables reverse logistics processes such as returns and recalls. So traceability as a business process is enabled by the GS1 system of standards. Now our work in GS1 Healthcare focused on traceability is guided by our GS1 members' vision for traceability in healthcare. So at the top of the webinar I mentioned that our standards are created and developed with our members. They input their knowledge and expertise into the creation of the standards, and therefore they have crafted this vision for traceability in healthcare. And what we are aiming for, what we're working towards, is full end-to-end actionable visibility of both finished pharmaceuticals and medical devices in healthcare globally, from the point of production to the point of use. And you will see that point of production and point of use have notes attached to them. And that's because across the supply chain, point of production and point of use can vary depending on the type of stakeholder you are, whether you're a manufacturer or a repackager or even a pharmacist in a hospital. And so can point of use. So you can see that when we're talking about point of production or point of use, we mean these other terms as well, which are shown at the bottom of the slide. So that is our ultimate vision. That's what we are working towards. So in GS1 terms, what does that mean? Well, that means that all authentic items are identified with the appropriate GS1 identification keys and appropriate application identifiers, and those are additional attributes that you can attach to the GTIN, such as a serial number or a lot batch number, and that assignment and identification of the products happens at the point of production. So for a brand owner, a manufacturer, that may be in their manufacturing plant. In a pharmacy, in hospital, it may be at that point of production when, for example, chemotherapy products are being produced. That supply chain identifiers are associated with the patient and remain with or on the items throughout their intended useful life. And that relates to such things as surgical instruments that go through rigorous and repetitive cleaning and decontamination. Clearly, if you put a barcode or a tag on those items, you want them to remain with or on them throughout their intended useful life, so they have to be robust. That all physical locations are identified, again with a GS1 identification key, and here we will be talking about the GLN, the Global Location Number. That all patients and caregivers, when they're in the caregiving environment, are identified with the appropriate GS1 identification keys. So that's the identification and the capture. And the last three bullets relate to the share element. So agreed master data is captured and shared, agreed transactional data is captured and shared, and agreed event data is captured and shared. Once that is in place, that then enables a number of things to happen. If you implement GS1 standards, it means that you can track items as they move forward downstream in the supply chain. And here, this is the visionary part, hoping to do that in real time. But we also are aiming for tracing items, so that's looking backward or upstream, the history across the entire supply chain, from where the item is now back to the producer. And again, our vision is that that would happen in real time. That item identification is available for use at the patient bedside to ensure the patient rights are achievable. That patient electronic health records are updated with agreed traceability information, including caregiver identification. That counterfeit products are detected when entering the legitimate supply chain. And that product recalls would become fast, efficient, and effective. So you can see that our members' vision for traceability in healthcare is a big ask. But we are moving towards that goal. So along with the GS1 system of standards for identification, for capture, and for sharing, we have a global traceability standard for healthcare, the GTSH, and the link is there for you to download it. It is publicly available. And to complement that, we have an implementation guide, which is also available at that link. It is a standard document. It is very comprehensive. So we just have here a few slides, very high level, that explains what the GTSH is. So it defines a process. Remember, traceability is a business process enabled by the GS1 system of standards. But the GTS identifies it independently, or defines it independently from the choice of enabling technologies. It defines a minimum traceability, the minimum traceability system requirements for organization of all sizes and levels of operational maturity. It details the corresponding GS1 standards, technical standards used within information technology tools. So it talks about using GTIN, GLN, serial number, lot batch, the carriers, and also the data sharing. It meets core legislative and business needs to cost efficiently track, that's the forward movement, one step down, and track back one step up at any point along the entire supply chain. So that is the model, the minimum model required for traceability in healthcare. One up, one down. And I'll come on to that again. It describes the creation of accurate records of transaction in events, and it provides for fast data communication about traceable items between trading partners across the supply chain. But what it's not a law or regulation, and it's not a replacement for safety or quality programs. It's complementary. One of the things that it does include is a clear definition of traceability. So lifted from that standard, the definition says traceability is the ability to track forward the movement through specified stages of the extended supply chain and trace backward the history, application or location of that which is under consideration. So it covers both tracking and tracing, the forward and backward movement across the supply chain. But I mentioned this, the one up, one down, and that is the minimum model required for traceability. But implementing a traceability system within a supply chain requires all parties involved to systematically link the physical flow of materials and products with the flow of information about them. That is a fundamental rule within traceability. As a product moves across the supply chain between parties, information about that product must flow in parallel. This slide attempts to capture that one up, one down model. So you'll see along the bottom there the physical flow of product going between one partner to another. So from manufacturer to distributor, it might go to another distributor, through to a hospital. So the goods are flowing from one partner to another. And at the same time, those parties are capturing data about that product and what is happening, what it is and what is happening to it. So the first party in the supply chain, the manufacturer, will capture internally data about the item, and then when they receive a purchase order and they ship it to the next party in the supply chain, they will capture that movement. So that is going from the manufacturer to the distributor. So the manufacturer knows where the product went, one down from itself. And the distributor that receives the product knows where it came from. So it knows one up where it received that product from. And as that is happening, certain elements of that data needs to be shared across the supply chain. So as the physical flow of materials goes across the supply chain, so must information about those products. So to reiterate those common elements of the Global Traceability Standard, it's a process standard enabled by the GS1 system of technical standards. It includes a definition of traceability that includes both the tracking forward and the tracing backwards. Fundamental to enabling traceability or having a traceability system in place is that in parallel with the flow of product, there has to be a flow of information about the product. And across the entire supply chain, there is internal traceability within the four walls of a party in the supply chain, such as a manufacturer or a distributor, or indeed even within a hospital. But there is external traceability when product and information moves from one traceability partner and another, for example, between a manufacturer and a distributor, or a manufacturer and a hospital or a pharmacy. There are inputs, e.g. the receipt of product, and that must be linked to outputs, for example, shipments or dispensing. So, a hospital may receive product from a manufacturer, and then it moves further down the supply chain to a ward. So, the goods are received, and then an output of that is that it is shipped to a ward, and that must be captured. Remember the fundamental that the flow of product has to have an information flow in parallel. Now, across the supply chain, parties can have varying roles. They can be a supplier, so a distributor could be a supplier to a hospital, but they will also be a buyer. They will be buying and receiving goods from a manufacturer. So parties can have varying roles depending on the situation. And also, the GTSH includes business requirements. So there are business requirements that need to be met to enable traceability. It also includes business rules. So those rules need to be followed to have a robust traceability system based on the minimum one up, one down model. So that was a very high-level overview of the Global Traceability Standard for Healthcare. But as I said, it is available for you to download. Now I'm just going to cover a few case studies of implementation of GS1 standards in hospitals. GS1 Healthcare publishes and has published over the last 5 years what we call the GS1 reference books. They contain high-level summaries of case studies from around the world and focus on different points of the supply chain. There are common themes. They are the implementation from receipt to the patient takes time. It takes years to implement traceability across the supply chain. These may be one project, but they are usually one project within a multi-project work program. They involve all parties across the supply chain, including GS1 member organizations. And they focus on solving key issues. So what is the problem that they are solving? Without exception, all efforts have led to improved patient safety. But you will see if you look or download these reference books that one size does not fit all. So you can download any of those 5 reference books at those links on this slide. But I've just picked 3 or 4 that have been published. So this one here is from the Netherlands, and its headline there is that GS1 standards help to save 106 million euros in Dutch hospitals. It was published in 2011. So over on the left you'll see the hospitals that were involved, And remember I said they focused, or it focused on solving key issues. So what is the issue? The issue was increased pressure to improve patient safety and save costs in hospitals. I mean, that's a common challenge across healthcare systems globally. But they also had a suboptimal management of inventory of medical devices for the operating room and manual processes for ordering, billing and recall. And I think those two elements are again common. So what was the solution? They implemented effective IT infrastructure for traceability and GS1 standards. So they've implemented keys, GTIN, GLN, and the Global Traceability Standard. And what were the results? So their medical device inventory management for the operating room, they identified potential savings across 100 Dutch hospitals of 106 million euros, and they see that as a conservative estimate. So from the work they've done, that's what they have extrapolated the savings could be. So they've estimated the cost to implement the system per hospital. They've estimated the return on investment per hospital, as well as the reductions in inventory, 20%, decrease in obsolete stock by 80%, reducing handling expenses for stock replenishment by 25%, accelerating recall procedures, and increasing effective use of consignment goods. So this is a very high-level summary of this case study, but you will find it in one of those reference books, and you can download it. The second one takes us to Canada. And here, GS1 standards help to save 7% in medication purchasing and packaging in one hospital, the North York General. So it's in Toronto, in Canada. Their issues was risk of medication errors at the point of care due to insufficient product identification and lack of unit dose barcoding of medication. Again, common issues across healthcare organizations globally. What was the solution? They installed an automated repackager and barcoding station. They implemented a point-of-care barcode verification system and GS1 standards, including the GTIN and barcodes as the carriers. What were the results? They saw reduction in medication errors at the point of care, realizing cost savings of between 7 and 8% each year in terms of its medication purchasing and packaging activities. So they estimated the cost to implement in the hospital was around 250,000 euros. But they saw improvements in efficiently affixing barcodes to unit doses and efficient bedside verification. So again, very high level summary of that implementation. This one brings us to France, and this was related to GS1 standards and traceability of surgical instruments. So their issue is that they had ineffective traceability of 22,000 surgical instruments during their sterilization process. So their solution was implementation of a traceability system. They undertook laser marking of surgical instruments with the GS1 data matrix barcode and implementation of standards including the GTIN, GLN and the Global Traceability Standard. Their results were they now have effective traceability of surgical instruments during the sterilization process. They have improved and increased inventory management. They have increased traceability down to the individual instrument level. and the migration or the movement of instruments between boxes is now traceable. And our last example, we go to Ireland. And here, GS1 standards helped to save €5 million worth of stock at St James's Hospital. And St James's is the Centre for Hereditary Coagulation Disorders. So their issue was infected medication remained in the supply chain after a recall in 2001, leading to subsequent infection and over 80 deaths. So they had lack of standardized barcodes on haemophilia medication and ineffective traceability. So what was the solution? They deployed multi-location electronic patient record system and a medication delivery traceability system, and that goes all the way through to the patient's homes. And they did that through the implementation of GS1 standards, including the GTIN, GLN, and the GS1 data matrix carrier. What were the results? They saved over €5 million worth of medication stock that had been removed from the supply chain. They reduced product wastage to 0 in the year after the implementation and reduced documentation errors to 0 in the year after implementation. They also undertook a mock recall, and that identified location of all 100% of the medication within 10 minutes. So that's a phenomenal case study. So, as I said, you can find out more and explore more case studies in our reference books. If you want to find out more about HPAC, you can go to that link. You can become a member by clicking on that link and joining us through the community room. You can download 2 of our 3 publications. Those are the 2 position statements. And of course, we encourage you to take part in the Healthcare Provider Awards. And to remind you that this is the first webinar in a series of webinars, and all of our future webinars will be focusing on implementation case studies from around the world, and they are listed here, and you can find more details on our website. So that includes my webinar, and I will pause for questions.
Thank you very much, Dennis. So if you have any questions, please use the question tool on the webinar icon. And Dennis, I already have a couple of questions for you if you're ready to take them.
Yes, please.
So I have a question from Justin Bitter, who's the chairman of the Traceability Focus Group for GS1 Netherlands. So his question is the following. The Netherlands is thinking about a nationwide register for track and tracing of passive and active implants. Which country has, with Sweden, some experience with this? Should you form all the registers or just one? And what would be the advantages and disadvantages of them?
Okay. Well, I know I'm based in the UK, and I know that there is an implant registry in the UK. And indeed, I mentioned on one of my slides the metal on metal issue that was identified. And the fact that the United Kingdom had that implant registry, they were able to identify patients that may be at risk of this issue because it was registered in the implant registry, that those products, which hospitals had received them, who had supplied them, And then those hospitals were able to identify the patients that could be affected by that issue. And so definitely the UK has an implant registry, and benefits is that it does make it easier to identify patients that are at risk. But it is one step, it is one part of the overall approach. Do you have another question?
Yes, sorry, Janice, I have another question from Vincent Callan. Can you provide a hospital reference site where they are tracking to EPR level using GS1 standards?
I would have to check into that. So that is, they're putting traceability all the way through into the patient record. I think that's what Vincent is asking. Well, I know that St James is doing that for the haemophilia project, so but I would need to do more research. There may be examples in our reference books on traceability through to the patient record. We can send those references to him.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all the questions I have now. Does anybody have any other questions? Please don't hesitate to use the tool to ask questions.
And I would say just in the last minute or two, as we said, we have recorded this, so it will be made available to you. We're also going to send out a short survey to find out what you thought of this first webinar, and hopefully you will take part in that.
Okay, there seems to be no more questions. Janice, your presentation was very clear.
Thank you.
If people have questions, don't hesitate to send an email directly to Janice. She put her email contacts on the presentation. And as she just mentioned, everything will be published online before the weekend, so you'll be able to listen again to the recording and go through the presentation. Oh, I just got a question from Diana. Does GS1 currently working out a concept to build a concept for the interface for pharmacies to get the data from the manufacturer?
Sorry, can you read that again?
Sorry, yeah. Is GS1 currently working out a concept to build for the interface for pharmacies to get the data from the manufacturer?
Okay, so well, we develop standards. We're not a solution provider, but there are numerous solution providers who base their systems on GS1 standards. So I would say we're not building a solution, but the standards would enable sharing of data between supply chain parties. So I talked about master data, transactional data, and event data, and all of those are required to share data between parties.
Thank you. Okay, I think this is it. So time's up. Thank you everyone for attending the webinar. Thank you, Janice, for taking the time to present this wonderful presentation. And look forward to seeing you all next month for the second webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Have a lovely day, everyone. Goodbye.